here. Big one or big?
It's day 3, the last day of the G8, G20 summit, and the Alternative Media Center, there aren't that many people here. I guess some of them are maybe trying to get into the Metro Toronto Convention Center where the G20 meetings are going to be held. Yesterday there was a organizations had a public rally along University and Queen Street, and I did some video, and along University it seemed to be okay. There wasn't any trouble, but later on the TTC was shut down because there were violent incidents along Queen Street, and some other media were able to capture the vandalism that went on. Windows were being broken, a police car was put on fire, and you can do a search online to see some of the other videos. So I think some broadcasts will be on as with the meetings that the public and the media are allowed to view, but with all the fencing that was put along Front Street to block off the public, and it was for security purposes, obviously, because like incidents like yesterday seem to accompany some of the other previous G8, G20 meetings, like based on the videos that I looked online yesterday. So anyway, I think if the public is curious, you'd have to go on the internet or TV to see what's happening inside.
I heard his comments.
Is this inside the Metro Toronto Convention Center?
From the mayor of the city. I mean, we're sabotaging ourselves, and we're muzzling ourselves after we sabotage ourselves. It doesn't strike me as making sense. I don't know how you do it. If you're trying to put out a statement that makes everybody happy, I don't know how you do it. Especially with the rest of your constituency, right? So I feel your pain.
Which is why I'm talking to you, somebody else in traffic, the perfect thing.
Yeah, well.
But it doesn't seem like anyone banking out except for this one CLC.
Yeah, you guys didn't actually put a statement, did you? On police violence and the action.
Each country had several delegates, I guess. They came in a big group.
Good luck with that.
If you see anything come out, let me know.
Okay. Sorry? Did I? Oh. By doing what? Yeah, well, that's essentially where we are, right? Sorry? Yeah, you know, to be honest, I'm more perturbed.
Is it the Metropolitan Center?
The Metro Toronto Convention Center. It's probably, yeah, inside with all the delegates from each country.
But I think we do have access there
Where?
later on.
As far as I know, we don't. I don't. I only have an alternative.
Well, we have both, but
Oh, you have both?
that's
I don't know if you're-
open to the media, so media in general, I think.
Oh, so accredited music can get in.
Yeah, there's no cool for the on va essayer.
Sending thank you cards, hopefully something like chocolate.
Bon après-midi tout le monde. Nous sommes venus ici à Toronto au moment où les préoccupations concernant les dettes des gouvernements étaient grandissantes. Ça a été l'enjeu que nous avons dû affronter de front. À ce sommet, nous avons établi des objectifs clairs et historiques pour les économies développées concernant la réduction des dettes et la stabilisation et la réduction des ratios dette PIB. Ces objectifs sont d'au moins 50% d'ici 2013 pour la réduction des déficits et pour ce qui est des ratios dette PIB, nous devons les stabiliser ou les réduire d'ici 2016. Cela dit, la consolidation fiscale n'a pas une fin en soi. Des stimulus encore auront un rôle à court terme dans le temps cadre pour une croissance économique forte, durable et équilibrée, le cadre que nous avons promis à Pittsburgh. Nous applaudissons les actions récentes par plusieurs pays importants à cet égard, par exemple le budget et la réduction du déficit du Royaume-Uni, la flexibilité du taux de chômage de la Chine, la loi américaine sur la réforme financière. Et comme la prochaine étape d'entente cadre sur la croissance économique forte, durable et équilibrée, la déclaration du G20 de Toronto exige des évaluations à niveau de chaque pays au moment où nous approchons le sommet de Séoul. Nous avons conclu une entente aussi pour une importante réforme du secteur financier, accroître et améliorer les normes de capitalisation, une surveillance réglementaire prudente, et nous nous sommes engagés à terminer ce travail important plus tôt que prévu à Séoul. Chaque pays aussi pourra déterminer s'il veut percevoir une taxe bancaire. Nous nous sommes entendus sur d'autres sujets, continuer de progresser sur les mesures antiprotectionnistes. L'entente de Washington se poursuit pour un autre 3 ans et l'allègement de la dette en Haïti qui est une priorité importante pour notre pays. Le G20 a encore beaucoup à faire pour vraiment enraciner la reprise. Mais ici, les étapes importantes, les étapes que le Canada cherchait. Greetings once again. We arrived here amid growing concerns over the growth of sovereign debt as we strive to build strong, sustainable, and balanced economies. That is the issue we have had to tackle head on, and we have arrived at firm targets for advanced economies on debt reduction and reducing debt-GDP ratios. The targets are a 50% deficit reduction by 2013 and a debt to GDP ratio that should be on a at least stabilized or on a downward trend by 2016. Now that said, all leaders recognize that fiscal consolidation is not an end in itself. There will be a continued role for ongoing stimulus in the short term as we develop the framework for strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. In terms of the framework, we want to applaud a number of recent actions that are important down payments on that framework, if I can use that term. First of all, the budget of the United Kingdom, which strongly tackled the British deficit, Chinese flexibility on exchange rates, and the new U.S. law on financial sector reform. The G20 summit declaration that puts some of the meat on the bones of the framework of strong, sustainable, and balanced growth will lead us to country-level assessments as we approach the next meeting in Seoul. It's also important to note agreement on ongoing and important financial sector reforms, specifically to increase the quality and quantity of capital standards, to enhance prudent regulatory oversight, and a commitment, most importantly, to accelerate this work and complete it by the summit in South Korea. I should note as well the issue of bank levies has been left to individual countries. There are important agreements on a number of other matters. I'll just mention a couple. Continued progress on anti-protectionism. We've agreed to extend the Washington standstill for another 3 years, and debt relief for the country of Haiti, which, as you know, is an important priority for Canada. There's also some important work that's been completed, I should mention as well, on reform of international institutions, and that work will also continue as we move forward. The G20 still has a lot to do to fully entrench recovery. The G20 still has a lot to do to fully entrench the global recovery, but these are important steps forward, and as you know, they were steps that Canada has been seeking.
Thank you very much. We'll now have time to take questions. When I call your name, please stand up. The microphone will come to you. To keep things moving, we're going to limit it to one question, no follow-ups, to get as many reporters through as we can. First question, Amanda Lang, CBC.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, there's already an indication, at least from President Sarkozy of France, that these targets may be a goal, but not necessarily a firm commitment. We wonder, too, about America's ability to meet deficit reduction targets. Can you comment on how confident you are?
Well, in terms of European countries, they've already agreed to similar commitments within the European Union itself. I'm confident that all countries that have made these commitments will fulfill them and will need to fulfill them, because there will be market pressure, not just peer pressure. There will be market pressure to fulfill them. In the case of Japan, as you know, the declaration gives greater latitude to the Japanese case. The Japanese debt levels, well, much higher than the rest of us, are also entirely financed domestically. So there has been some recognition that Japan's targets may be slightly different, but I am firmly convinced that as we move forward, these will be targets that are pursued, and in most cases pursued as minimal objectives. In the case of Canada, we will, in all likelihood, meet these targets next year. In both cases, both the deficit to debt target. Others will take closer to the deadline.
On va continuer avec Madeleine Blais-Morin, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Harper. Chacun semble trouver son compte. Bonjour, Monsieur Harper. Chacun semble trouver son compte dans ces ententes, dans cette entente. Mais justement, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas trop de marge de manœuvre, de flexibilité, pour que chacun finalement fasse à sa tête et nuise aux chances de succès de cette entente? Et je vais me permettre aussi de reposer la question en français. Monsieur Sarkozy vient tout juste de dire que les cibles sont en fait un engagement volontaire. Que répondez-vous à cela?
Je peux dire toutes les ententes ici sont volontaires, dans le sens que nous sommes des pays souverains, mais nous avons pris des engagements et le monde attend notre performance. Dans le cas des cibles pour la fiscalité, c'est plus qu'une entente parmi les chefs. C'est une entente pour des marchés. Et comme on a regardé les développements dans les marchés pendant les derniers mois, c'est clair que les marchés s'attendent à nos actions. Et c'est essentiel pour la relance. Moi, j'ai beaucoup de confiance. J'ai déjà dit, en anglais, que les pays européens ont déjà pris des engagements très similaires dans le cadre de l'Union européenne. Pour le reste, nous avons donné une flexibilité au Japon, comme je viens de mentionner, qui a une situation un peu différente que le reste, mais pour le reste, c'est essentiel de respecter ça pour assurer la relance. Si je peux faire une autre observation, des pays ici sont des positions différentes et tous les chefs comprennent que c'est nécessaire que chaque pays a des différences qui seront reconnues par nos mesures. En même temps, nous sommes tous très clairs. La cohésion de G20 pendant ces réunions était très frappante. Très frappante. Et je pense que nous poursuivons de temps en temps des politiques un peu différentes, mais pour un seul objectif. Et c'est de développer un plan global pour la relance à long terme, pour développer et assurer ce cadre de la croissance économique forte, équilibrée et quel est l'autre mot? Forte, équilibrée, durable, oui. Nous développons ce cadre de la croissance forte, durable et équilibrée. Et nous devons faire nos propres choix, mais avec un objectif commun. Et c'est clair, tous les chefs comprennent que c'est la situation, c'est la base de nos actions.
We'll continue with Angela Persecuted from Korean Canadian.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. We have seen that the most important decisions are made within the G20 countries. Many people we have seen the economy and probably the future of the environment. Many people are asking, do we still need the G8?
The G8 is qualitatively different than the G20. It is a smaller group of countries that is, as we all recognize, less able to take decisive actions on the global economy than it once was. Because obviously now economic growth and economic development is so much more broadly spread around the world. That's why the G20 has, as we all admit, displaced the G8 as the world's principal forum for economic cooperation. That said, the G8 has certain advantages. The G8 does represent a group of countries that are longtime friends and allies, that are quite similar in their, for the most part, in their economic structure, and that tend to be like-minded across a broader range of issues. That allows us to have important consultations within us on economic matters, but also does allow the G8 to take decisions on things like development, democracy, peace and security that are still well outside the ambit of the discussions of the G20.
Continue with Brian Lilly from Sun Media. Prime Minister, as you and the other leaders have been meeting inside, the world's been watching the violence in the streets of Toronto. I'd like you to comment on a couple of things. One, the violence, and two, most of what Canadians have heard coming out of this has been very international in focus. Your maternal health initiative, the small business challenge, and they might be wondering, other than a big bill for the cleanup and the police, what do they get out of this? How does this talk of fiscal consolidation and international financial regulation reform really affect their lives?
Well, first of all, in terms of the violence, we obviously deplore the actions of a few thugs. But the reality is, unfortunately, that these summits attract this element, and that has been a problem, as we know, around the world. that said, that I think goes a long way to explaining why we have the kind of security costs around these summits that we do. Now, that all said, the number one issue we have today in Canada, have had for the past couple of years, without a shadow of a doubt, is the economy. But as I constantly remind Canadians, there isn't really a Canadian economy anymore. It is a global economy. And yes, the Canadian economy, so to speak, is doing better than many other countries. But the general trajectory of the Canadian economy, whether we're on the downhill as we were last year, or whether we're on the rebound as we are this year, is fundamentally determined by the state of the global economy. And that's what these meetings are all about, and that's why they are so critical. That's why it's so critical that we participate and play a major role, because Canadian jobs and Canadian futures are intimately linked to what goes on here. And quite frankly, everything that we do in our country to improve our country's position is ultimately to improve that position within the context of a global economy. And we cannot be effective at major economic matters any longer unless we work with our other economic partners around the world and work with them closely and intimately. That is essential. I know some people don't like it. It's a loss of national sovereignty, but it is a simple reality. It is a simple reality that we are in a global economy. The global economy is determining where we're headed and will determine our future, and we have to play our part in these forums to make sure that our interests are protected and advanced.
Vincent Maisonneuve pour Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Harper. Il y a des engagements clairs de la part des pays industrialisés. Quelles sont vos attentes par rapport aux économies aux pays émergents?
Moi, je pense que les pays émergents comprennent la réalité de la situation. Nous avons une situation dans la plupart des pays industrialisés. Le Canada est une exception, mais dans la grande majorité de ces pays, on aura une relance très lente, on aura la croissance très lente pour des années à venir, à cause des problèmes de leur position fiscale, à cause des problèmes dans leur secteur bancaire. Au Canada, nous avons une situation tout à fait différente dans le secteur bancaire, dans nos positions fiscales. Mais la réalité est que ça va faire des dommages à la croissance pour plusieurs années dans plusieurs pays, et c'est essentiel qu'on développe le demande économique, le demande domestique dans des pays émergents pour vraiment contribuer à la relance mondiale. Déjà, des pays émergents font ça. Ils ont aussi, malgré leur situation différente, ces pays ont développé des programmes de stimulus, même la Chine. Ces pays ont ici fait des engagements pour améliorer la flexibilité de leur taux de change. Et ces mesures, c'est essentiel pour, comme j'ai dit avant, pour le développement de ce cadre mondial, pour la croissance économique forte, durable et équilibrée. C'est essentiel. Et je pense que les pays émergents, ils ont leurs limites, mais ils sont tout à fait prêts à jouer leur rôle. Tout le monde ici comprend que nous sommes dans une économie mondiale. On doit travailler avec une attitude mondiale et avec des politiques qui fonctionnent pour tout le monde.
David Lunger, Reuters.
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Quick single question on China. Notwithstanding our words of introduction, we know the G20 wanted to formally welcome China's currency move in the communique, but that line was dropped because Beijing said that one policy was sovereign. There seems to be a contradiction here. How do you square China saying no, you can't say this because it's sovereign policy, with the idea of the G20, which is supposed to be the premier forum for global economic governance?
Well, generally speaking, it's quite frequent in declarations that countries don't want to be singled out. The declaration has an important commitment to greater exchange rate flexibility going forward. And as we know, the Chinese specifically have made that commitment to the world coming into and at this summit. And I'm confident that the Chinese will fulfill that commitment, and as we all know, when you make commitments like this on the world stage, you will be held accountable for them.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is the very last meal, and we got a lot more food today. And so it was I think it was for alternative media like people who were in this room. We were actually quite privileged to be able to be part of this in some way, even though we did not get direct access to the locations. We got the broadcast ahead of the public, which will be posted later on for the public on the websites of the G8 and G20. We got free meals, and hopefully the global economy and the Canadian economy will improve, through trading with the different countries, and through helping each other improve on a global level instead of just a national level, and that any of the poor around the world will eventually somehow improve together. I guess it's more of a cooperative instead of a competitive viewpoint of handling the economy. Thanks to the Canadian government for providing to the media, including alternative media.